One of the things that futuring as a profession does is allow people to move beyond the futures that are sort of their defaults. The default future is what you assume when you're not thinking about the future. So when you're planning your own day, you have a default future of that day. When you're planning out into the future of your career, or if you're in an organization, the future of your organization, what you assume to be around you is your default future. Now, a used future is when that default future doesn't actually come from your own context. It comes from somewhere else. It was developed at a different time, in a different place, by different people, and it may not be relevant to you or to your organization or your community. And sometimes they can actually be really damaging. There's a very acute sense that a lot of these used futures that we've gotten about the ways that we should live our own lives, these life narratives that we're supposed to fulfill, are just not going to work for us. Like, they were developed at a different time when education and employment and global trade worked differently, when social roles were different, when the structure of wages were different, that they just don't work. Because the reality is that even if all of the social and economic structures were there to allow that future to happen, there's a question of whether it really should. The jetpack future is the worst idea ever because, think about it, it's incredibly fuel intensive, it's individualized, it doesn't come with a sort of structure of how people don't hurt each other while they're flying through the air. It's very sort of like the idea of your personal transportation unit and, the environment be damned. And that's a classic example. And I think many people of our generation have a lot of these that we've sort of received. If you think through the ecological impacts of how we're currently going about modernity, and then you go back to all of these people living out their individual lives in that context, it's actually creating the opposite of Buckminster Fuller's challenge to create a world that works for 100% of the people without ecological degradation. So what we have is a bunch of futures that are past their expiration date, basically. And, we as a generation who are going to need to live through this future, it's up to us to figure out what to do with all these used futures that we've bought into, and whether or not we should recycle them or hack them and make them completely different, or make up our own and toss those in the compost bin of history. The whole reason why we do this kind of work is to help empower people to create their own futures, to examine critically the futures that they take for granted, and be able to change them and remix them if possible.